I remember my grade 11 English teacher once saying, "Death is the greatest mystery of life." We don't know what lies beyond the veil, but we've spent lifetimes trying to understand it. For most of my life, it never felt like much of a mystery. I believed life was simply a series of impulses fired by the brain, and when those stopped, that was the end. No afterlife, no grand secret. Just silence. That was before I saw her. After graduating high school, my parents gave me a blunt message: time to find a job. They didn't care what it was as long as it paid real money. I came across an ad for a landscaping position at a local cemetery. The pay was decent, and the idea of working outside appealed to me. I submitted my resume and got hired the same day. My boss seemed almost desperate. Apparently, several people had quit during their first week. He assumed it was the heat and the physical labor. I'm not so sure anymore. The first 2 days were a roller coaster. Day 1 felt amazing. I was proud, energized, and sure I'd found the perfect job. By the end of day 2, I was sore, sunburnt, and second-guessing every decision I'd made. But the team was kind, and their appreciation for my help kept me going. It was on the 3rd day that I first saw her. I was planting flowers near the entrance when I noticed her, a woman dressed entirely in black, complete with a dark veil, standing quietly by a grave several rows away. She didn't move, only stood there, weeping softly. I assumed she was visiting a loved one, perhaps marking an anniversary. People grieve in their own ways, after all. After a while, she turned and walked away, her steps slow and graceful. Curiosity got the better of me. Once she was gone, I approached the grave to see who she had been visiting. What I found puzzled me: it belonged to someone who had passed over 200 years ago. While she could have been a distant relative, her intense grief and attire seemed out of place. I dismissed it as strange but not concerning. That changed a few days later. I saw her again, same dress, same veil, but this time she wasn't alone. An older man stood beside her. He wore a faded black suit that looked decades old and hadn't seen care in a long time. The woman knelt down and ran her hands through the soil, gently lifting a clump of earth to her face. I told myself she was just smelling it, like someone appreciating the scent of fresh-cut grass. But a deep discomfort stirred in me. The man beside her moved awkwardly, his limbs stiff and jarring, like each step caused him pain. His movements reminded me of something, but I couldn't quite place it. He turned suddenly when I shifted where I stood, as if he heard me. His eyes, I noticed, were completely white. He seemed to be searching for me, even though it was clear he couldn't see. Only when the woman placed her hand on his back did he stop. Together, they walked away, leaving behind only questions. Then came the tragedy. A few days later, the community mourned a heartbreaking accident. A 10-year-old boy had died in a freak incident on his family's farm. His funeral drew a large crowd, myself included. That's when I saw them again. The veiled woman and the old man stood on a nearby hill, watching silently. This time, a young girl stood between them. She wore an old-fashioned brown dress and had a pale, worn appearance, like someone who had been ill for a long time. Her eyes, what little I could make out from a distance, seemed clouded, nearly white. The trio never joined the service. They simply stared. Later, my boss asked me to help fill the grave. It was a tough job, but it paid extra, so I agreed. We worked until nightfall. When we finished, I told my boss I'd walk home. It was a warm summer night, but something about the air felt different. The cemetery, usually quiet and peaceful, seemed heavy. Every shadow looked deeper, and every breeze sounded like a whisper. I told myself it was just my imagination. Then I heard footsteps. They were distant at first, then closer. I followed them, figuring it might be trespassers. As I neared the hill, I got low to stay out of sight. What I saw made my heart stop. The woman was there again, with the man and the girl. They stood over the fresh grave. She knelt and began speaking in a language I couldn't recognize. Her voice was rhythmic, like a chant. Then, she lifted her veil. I raised my phone and zoomed in. Her face wasn't normal. Her skin was gray and cracked, with deep lines across her cheeks. In places, it looked like her flesh had been replaced with dark earth. Her eyes glowed faintly, an unnatural yellow with red edges. She reached down, lifted another handful of soil, and did something that still chills me to remember. After placing it in her mouth, she began to tremble. Then, she opened her mouth and what came out were not words, but shapes. Tiny, black, wriggling things spilled from her lips and burrowed into the ground. For a moment, all was still. Then, the soil of the grave shifted, and a hand emerged. The boy was rising. He looked different, unnaturally pale, with the same clouded eyes. Where his injuries had been, something seemed to move beneath his skin, filling the empty spaces with eerie precision. Slowly, he stood, and the woman embraced him like a loving mother reunited with her child. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. My body refused to move. Then, the woman turned her gaze toward me. I hadn't made a sound, but she knew I was there. Her glowing eyes locked onto mine through my phone screen. Suddenly, the girl was in front of me, her movements jerky and unnatural. The old man and boy began to approach. I realized what it was that their movements reminded me of: puppets. They moved like marionettes, and the woman was their puppeteer. She held up her hand, and they stopped. Then she walked to me. I couldn't run. I couldn't even speak. She reached out and touched my cheek, her hand cold, her skin rough with something living underneath it. I felt something squirming close to the surface of her skin and silently begged for it not to reach me. The next morning, I quit. My boss thought I was just another kid who couldn't handle hard work. Maybe it's better that way. I've never told anyone what happened. I don't dare. I fear that if I ever speak of it, those things might return. Now, whenever I pass a cemetery, I wonder, how many graves are still just graves? And how many are something else? I no longer claim to understand death. But I do know this: when my time comes, don't bury me. Burn me. Scatter me to the wind. It's the only way I'll ever truly rest.